It's been a week since patch 13.3, so today we're going to take a look at how those champions buffed or nerfed are doing so far. Every single patch this season has had some pretty huge changes, and we already know of tons more coming in 13.4. Starting off with that top lane as always, and in the S tier we have Singed, Shen, Kled, Camille, Darius, Olaf, Akshan, Jax, Gangplank, Udyr and Rengar. Yes, still a ton of champions in the S tier in the top lane, still performing really well at the moment. So if you are looking for something new to main, there's tons of choice. One pick that is creeping up though is Kayle, who got buffed last week and is definitely seeing some better results after those changes. She had been struggling and a little bit forgotten about for a while, but now just those little buffs have really made a difference. Kayle is by no means broken, but she's definitely seen some improvements and her win rate has gone up by around 1.5% across the majority of ranks. We all know just how scary a late game Kayle can be. And once you get that level 16 and fully upgraded your passive, well, you're probably going to win the game. If you don't want to play for the late game and you want to play for the early game though, you should definitely consider playing Kled right now. Kled mains are having the time of their life, and his win rate at the moment is almost a bit godlike. Now, the reason for him being so good is it was already in a really good position, but now some of his harder matchups are a bit weaker and his items have got better. Black Cleaver is super strong, and Hydra and Eclipse still make this champion seriously hurt. Kled is one of those champions that can dominate the 1v1, but he can also slap the enemy jungler in a 1v2 scenario too. And then if he wants to, he just presses ultimate and roams around the map and kills everybody. If you can have that early impact and make your mark with your insane damage across the map and through the top lane, you're going to win a lot of games on Kled at the moment. If you do want to try something completely different though, people are having a fantastic time on Alistar. Yes, Alistar in the top lane. It's been picked up recently by higher elo players wanting to shut down picks like Jax and Wukong, and it's just doing exactly that. You are literally just an anti-CC, crowd control heavy tank in the top lane that can just headbutt away any risk and any danger. You set up ganks extremely well as well. You also deal more damage than you'd realise. You become exceptionally tanky, especially with that ultimate. And if the lane phase isn't too fun, you can just roam around the map and destroy everyone else instead. The string of AP buffs to Alistar have made his AP itemization options far better. People have even been playing him in the mid lane with Everfrost. But just rushing utility and tank items like Sunfire and Radiant Virtue seems to be the most effective way to play him in the top lane. Alistar Top is the expert at infuriating and frustrating his enemies as he roams around, locking everyone down and becoming unkillable. So if that sounds like fun, give him a go. If you do want to see what items and runes people are using on the roaming cow in the top lane, then check out our desktop app and get everything you need to know imported straight into your client. Just click the link in the description to see it all for yourself, guys. Moving into the jungle now, and in the gold tier we still have Udyr and Maokai. In the S tier we have Elise, Fiddlesticks, Jarvan, Amumu, Nunu and Rammus. Yes, Udyr and Maokai are still completely busted, but you'll be happy to know that they are receiving nerfs next week. Let's see if those changes are finally enough to dethrone them. One champion that no one really expected to pop off this patch was Jarvan, but he's probably up there with some of the most broken champions in the game, completely out of nowhere. All they did to Jarvan was buff his base armor and buff his W. It's as simple as that. They didn't change anything else, and that doesn't really sound like it's going to make that much of a difference, right? But in fact, he's now got nearly a 54% win rate across the majority of ranks. Now, for someone that before this patch was around a 47 to 49% win rate, this is absolutely absurd, and just goes to show how minor changes can make such a difference. Jarvan has a pretty easy clear, but it's those really punishing ganks that make him so hard to play against. And once you've stacked up that ability haste with the new itemization options, well, you can flag and drag to your heart's content. No, seriously, you can use it like every 3 seconds. It is ridiculous. So what this actually means is you've got a highly mobile, crowd controlling bruiser with engage, with disengage, with escape, and huge damage. So it makes sense why he's suddenly so good. The Zac nerfs have definitely brought him down a notch. Finally, this champion was way too good for far too long. Now, he is still quite a good niche pick in the solo lanes and is still fine in the jungle, but he has gone down to the A tier from the S tier. He's no longer completely abusable and broken like Udyr and Maokai are, and now he just seems in a fairly well balanced position. You still have the various itemization routes to go for. You can go full tank, you can go AP bruiser, you can even go for that cheesy Evan Shroud CDR build. And to be honest, all of these are still really effective depending on the game, depending on the draft. And if you still enjoy playing Zac and you weren't just picking him because he was completely broken, well, you'll be happy to know that he's in a really good spot now. Lee Sin and Kayn both also got some good buffs last week, and they've really made a positive impact. These champions really did need that little bit of help as they were struggling for far too long. These guys are definitely not broken, but they're in a much better position already since these changes. Lee Sin's actually in the A tier for the first time in a long time, and Kayn is still in the B tier, but performing much better too. These kind of choices of champions are the kind of champions that you need to be good at. You can't be first time in Kayn or Lee Sin in ranked and expect good results. But if you've got the mastery, you've got the experience, and you've got the know-how, they're fantastic picks, and probably better than the respective tiers if you've mastered them. Well, let's move down into the mid lane now, and in the god tier we still just have Anivia. In the S tier though, we have Cassiopeia, Tristana, Akshan, Annie and Aurelion Sol. The LeBlanc buffs did help her out slightly, but haven't really been enough to impact her tier placement for now. Annie, on the other hand, was completely, ridiculously and utterly broken. She genuinely had a nearly 60% win rate a few days after the patch dropped, and since the hotfix now she's hovering around 53 to 54% in a much better but still extremely strong position. The thing is with Annie, what they did is they just buffed too many things at the same time. Now she was struggling, but to be honest she was a little bit underrated already, and significantly buffing her E and her ultimate and giving her 4 stacks of her passive every time she spawns was just a bit too much. If you do enjoy Annie, now is the best time to play her, because to be honest we do expect another further nerf over the next few weeks. The new Aurelion Sol rework has been completely and utterly bonkers. When this rework first dropped, a lot of people were basically thinking that it was a little bit rubbish. But then after a bit of experimentation, after a few games of seeing it in the late game, they realised it was completely broken. The range of his abilities, the sheer consistent AoE damage and CC that he brings to the table is just completely unmatched. And honestly, if you do get to the very later stages of the game against Aurelion Sol, it's going to be so hard for you to beat him. He has way too much consistent damage, he has crazy mobility, and he just has a lot of durability as well. Now, despite his relatively average win rate, especially after the hotfix nerfs, we're still going to keep him in the S tier. Because if you can get to the mid to late game and get that Stardust passive scaled up, he's just so unbeatable. The Kassadin nerfs have really brought him back down to reality though. He was so strong for way too long, and now all of a sudden he's completely over nerfed. His win rate has fallen down by around 4 to 5%, and now he's sitting pretty comfy in the B tier, and even that might be a little bit generous. Kassadin always has these periods where he's broken and then he's a bit underwhelming, and this is going to be another one of those periods where he's just not that good again. Obviously, if you do get the right draft and you still scale and still get that damage and get that level 16, you're always going to be a threat. But generally speaking, after these nerfs, it's not going to happen quite as often. Let's move down into that bottom lane now and start off with those AD carries, none of which got changed in this patch. In the S tier, we have Kai'Sa, Twitch, Caitlyn, Samira, Draven, Xayah, Jhin and Karthus. The AD carry meta is all about going for that Infinity Edge or Navori Quick Blades second right now. So if you're building anything else instead, you need to ask yourself why. Sivir is actually a little bit underrated at the moment. Everyone knows she's quite a safe pick in the AD carry position, but she scales really well as well. She's one of those picks that you just love having in any team comp, with that ultimate just providing so much engage and disengage. She has fantastic wave clear, really consistent AoE damage, and the spell shield is one of the best defensive abilities out of any AD carry. Sivir has definitely had her fair share of the spotlight, especially since that mini rework last year. But after a few too many nerfs, she hasn't quite been the same since. However, the changes this patch and the changes to the AD carry and the support meta have made Sivir come back as a really strong pick. Her win rate is currently around 51%, which is not too shabby whatsoever. And if you do want a really consistent AD carry to play into almost any team comp, give her a go. Someone who's definitely not underrated though is Samira, and she is winning and snowballing so many games this patch. She is getting some nerfs next week, so it's the perfect time to abuse her while she's still absolutely bonkers. Samira has tons of damage, she has great mobility, she's fantastic with those newly buffed engaging supports like Nautilus. And if you do get fed on Samira in the lane phase, you have all the tools to stomp every single teamfight you come across. The AoE damage from your ultimate, the E resets, the wind wall, and yeah, she's very difficult to shut down. If you do need some AP in your team comp, then you should definitely consider trying picking up Karthus. Higher elo players have realised for a while now that Karthus in that AD carry role is probably his best position. He actually has a crazy amount of early game damage with his Q. From levels 1 to 3, he wins most 2v2s if you play it well enough. And then after that, it's pretty much all about scaling, getting those crazy AP items and spamming that ultimate every time you have it up. Even if you die pretty early on into the team fight, if it's stacked around Dragon, you can get so much damage off with your passive and then press R and often end up with quadras and pentas. Karthus works well with most support picks, to be honest. He works well against a lot of support picks and AD carry picks too, and he's just a really great AP choice to play in that bot lane. So if you are good enough at landing those Qs, give him a go. Finally, let's have a look at those supports, and in the S tier we have Blitzcrank, Rakan, Maokai, Nautilus, Annie, Pyke and Rel. Yes, we already spoke about how broken Annie is in the mid lane, and because of that she's also OP in the top tiers for support too. So one of the recently buffed melee supports was Nautilus, and he's always been that champion that is just so terrifying when he's viable. Nautilus's Q's hitbox is the size of the moon. It's one of those abilities that is so punishing to play against, and if he does hit it, he's going to follow that with his auto, he's going to press his Z, and if he does have his ultimate, well, you're probably dead. Nautilus is probably the most reliable tank support in the game, because even if the lane phase doesn't go to plan, even if the game isn't really going that well, all you gotta do is press your ultimate on the most important target in the enemy team, which will always give you an opportunity to take them down alongside your teammates. Nautilus is super threatening in the lane phase with those hooks, but he's also fantastic at roaming because of this as well. He's got stupidly punishing ganks through to the mid lane to assist his jungler, and yeah, if you're good enough on him and you can land those Qs, he is such a good carry support to play this patch. Speaking of carrying from support, Rakan is borderline OP at the moment. Now at lower ranks, people don't quite know how to really use him, but as you get better at the game and you get better at Rakan, you realise that he's just not very punishing and he offers so much crowd control and engage. If you're playing against those low mobility AD carry supports like Ashe and you're playing Rakan, you can genuinely just farm her. Every time you W's up, jump on her and kill her alongside your AD carry. Once you have got your ultimate, your 2v2 potential goes through the roof. You can dart in and out of fights, you can shield people, you can knock them up, and you've got that Q for some sustain too. And in team fights, if you do manage to land your WR combo on a whole enemy team, not only are you going to feel like a complete badass, but you're probably going to win that team fight. Another carry support who's doing much better since the recent changes is Pyke. Now Pyke takes a lot of practice to actually play perfectly. He has so many unique tips and tricks in his kit that allow him to completely outplay anyone against all the odds. From those flashies and early aggression you have with those hooks in the lane phase, to landing the perfect cleanup ultimate resets in teamfights. The thing is with Pyke, you really do need to be good at him to make him actually effective, because if you're a little bit average, you're not really going to have too much impact, and if someone else is playing an easy support like Sona, all they're going to do is spam those heals and they're going to be more useful than you. However, if you can stomp the lane phase, if you can carry the map, if you can land those big ultimates, if you can land those AoE stuns, well, this champion's limit is endless. So if you are thinking about one-tricking a new support, you should definitely give Pyke a go. And that's going to bring us to the end of our updated patch 13.3 tier list video for you. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.